I'm glad we kind of covered that from the start. So I'm just going to open up another screen and say goodbye to all the faces that I was seeing. So basically, I'm going to try to talk about some sports psychology aspects and how we can bring that into our IPPs. That'll come with a little introduction about who I am and why I think that's relevant, and then breaking down the what about sports psychology, why it's important, and I kind of broke it down into 5 topic areas that I think I'll talk about in more detail. Okay, so who am I? Basically, I played basketball at Hamilton, Ontario at McMaster University. I ended my career early due to an injury, and I had some metal put into my ankle. That kind of pushed me out of playing, but then ultimately led me into coaching a lot earlier than I think I might have. So this is where I'm at now, the University of Alberta. I've been coaching provincial teams, I think 4 years now. Don't really know, but it's been a great time. And I've also been able to do some graduate studies at the University of Alberta. So currently I'm doing my PhD in sports psychology and coaching. So I really love these opportunities to kind of bring both an applicable coaching side and a research side of sports psychology into other coaches across the province or the country. So when I coach, I typically use that introduction, but then there's also this side of me that I think is really important. So if I just point out a few things, whenever I teach an undergrad basketball class, we have a 3-on-3 tournament, and basically the first group that asks gets the ringer, which is me. This is my mom and I, both without planning, we're wearing Rocky t-shirts. So there's kind of a lot of these different pieces in our identity that we leave out, but really they're all there on the court, whether you're an athlete or a player. So kind of remembering these different components of who you are and how those can build us up on the court as opposed to kind of be pushed aside or left out. Okay, so if we talk about what sports psychology is, it's a lot. We would be here way too long. If anyone has a quick answer, let me know so I can finish my school early. But essentially, it's this focus on optimal performance and the well-being of an individual. Okay, so I have first 2 pictures here are sort of summary of how we might make decisions on the court. Okay, so this triangle here is representative of all the different things somebody could be looking at on the court or thinking about. Okay, so personal characteristics is who am I, what's my skill set, what do I value? Behavior could be whatever the task is or what I'm trying to do. And the environment is who's around me, my teammates, my coaches, you know, am I playing internationally? Am I playing on a club team? And we see how this kind of triangle of things connect with each other. And that relates to the information I perceive. So when I'm on the court as an athlete making a decision, these factors come into what I see. And what I see or feel or hear leads to my decision or my action. Okay, so we can see how these off-court factors also play a role in decisions on the court, even if they seem loosely related. The other diagram I chose to highlight here was this idea of self-regulated learning. So the ability to plan and set goals, use strategies to monitor performance and, you know, think about how you're going to work on that, and then reflect and adapt as you go on. So Robin talked about journaling and debriefing and reflecting on what's happening, and how can we get our athletes within our practices, whether it's an IPP or a team practice, to kind of go through these process of self-regulating their own learning. Okay, and then the last one is creating a positive climate within our elite youth sport. Okay, so we don't have to kind of give up performance or winning. It's okay to be competitive, but kind of bridging that in with who they are off the court as well. So I can't see the chat here, but I would like you to answer this question in the chat if you'd like. Thinking about what are some of the characteristics or skills of your ideal player. Okay, so if you have, can be 1-word answers, you can list 1 to 3, whatever you'd like. Reagan has the task of calling out some answers to me. So Reagan, if no one responds, just make words up, and then I'll think people were participating.
You just get all my ideas. Okay, great. So we've got coachable, competitive, positive attitude, resilient, flexible, smart, hardworking, good teammates, high basketball IQ.
Awesome. Okay, those are excellent. I'll cut you off there and I'll read the rest after. Those are great, like flexibility, that's awesome, coachable, hardworking. As you can tell from the pictures I chose here, of course I need some of my Alberta Panda team out there, but all these athletes are kind of smiling, they're having fun. Two characteristics that I really like in players are the ability to problem solve. So how can you kind of make decisions on the court based on what's happening? And then I really like athletes that are curious. And, you know, sometimes their questions can be a lot, especially if they're back to back, but somebody that's kind of buying into what's happening and really trying to solve the why and the purpose behind activities. Okay, so I'll just have you think of these two questions on your own, but when do you learn these characteristics or skills, and how do you learn these skills? Okay, so where and how are athletes getting these traits that our ideal player has? Okay, and if we think about all of these traits, you know, coachability, hardworking, resiliency, shooting, rebounding, if they're all thought about separately, we wouldn't ever have time to cover all of them. And especially in a time when our gym is very limited, how can we kind of build on each other and be really mindful of what we're doing? Okay, so without games going on right now, it's an ideal time to try to develop these components so they're there when we start competing in games. Okay, so building onto this why, again, I'm going to invite you to think about why you coach and why you kind of attended this session in the first place. Because we want to be letting people lead and learn in a safe environment. Okay, so again, for me, I'd like developing this kind of compassionate curiosity in athletes to figure out something on their own and take autonomy over what they're doing. Okay, so we'll be applying a very little bit of a sports psychology scope here. My goal is to have you consider these within your IPPs. So there's a lot of work that can happen off the court, but my plan is to give you tips that won't add any time to what you're doing, and you won't have to add something into your practice. But again, just giving you some mindful tips to consider while you're doing what you already are. Okay, so this is my attempt at an Instagram post. I don't have Instagram, but bridging these positive developmental outcomes that were in a lot of our ideal player traits with improved performance, which we had competitive and wanting to win, and using sports psychology as a tool to do that. So the first how is building our foundation. So this is a fundamental piece to building other components, and it's having a psychologically safe environment. So creating a shared sense of us between the coaches, the coaching staff, and the athletes. So gaining input, sharing the decision-making, the leadership responsibility, and without having this base, everything else you might try to build on may not work or it may fall apart. So I like to use the analogy of Jenga, and if we look at this one here, this is probably what we want to happen. You know, my base is full, it's strong, I'm in the most psychologically safe environment as possible, and it's always like that. In reality, I have a pretty good base here, but there's things we're working on, there's things we can be improving. It might look something like this, and then we want to avoid the base or a really unsafe environment where we have our single Jenga piece here and everything's kind of knocking over. Okay, so building that safe environment and building those relationships so that we can add on to the tools that our athletes have. A few things I say on the court. So again, during practices or drills, whether that's with an individual or a team, these are some comments that I've said during practices and how I've structured some drills. So committing to your decision would be telling athletes that you either make the right decision or you make the decision right. Okay, so instead of approaching these possessions as right or wrong or good or bad, I'm kind of approaching it as whatever happened, how can you make it better? And how can you improve the situation that you're in for yourself and your teammates? So if I'm doing a decision training where athletes catch the ball, and if the defender closes out, they're supposed to drive to the basket. Sometimes athletes might shoot the ball even with the defender closing out hard. But when I played even, I had lots of shots made right on my head, which shows if you commit to that shot in the first place, it might still go in. So even if the next time the easier shot is driving to the basket, the maybe better decision is driving to the basket, a lot can still happen out of other decisions. Okay, so commit to what you're doing and then work on improving where you can afterwards. Next is completing 10 great possessions. So instead of counting shots or me as a coach rating each possession, I allow the athletes to rate the quality. Okay, so now they have to think about what goes into good possessions, where is their standard, how accountable do they want to hold themselves and their teammates. So this offers a lot of great discussions about perspective with what they think is a great pass, let's say, versus what a coach or somebody else thinks is a great pass. So allowing them to self-evaluate and rate what's happening. And then the last one for improving perspective would be running the offense from every position. So typically, especially at the university level, we have our point guards, we have our shooting guards, and we have our forwards, right? And they run the offense and they practice from that position every time. I found that sometimes by having them flip positions, they end up learning a lot about what other people are going through. So I've had a point guard who comes back after running the post position and couldn't believe how many cuts and screens they're doing before they set a ball screen. So she kind of understands now why it might seem late on her end, but they have a lot more going on. So broadening our perspectives that way. Next is self-talk to a teammate. So not only creating a safe environment for the team, but also for the individuals involved. So what you're saying to yourself is just as, sometimes maybe more important than what you say out loud to others. So building on this kindness and this self-compassion and this emotional control. 3 things I do in practice for this is telling athletes to speak to yourself like you would your best friend. So if they're in a shooting workout and they miss a ton of shots, we've probably all the athlete that's maybe cursing, they're saying they can't shoot. And when you ask them to say that to their teammate, they hesitate. And they would never go up to their teammate, hopefully, and say, you know what, why are you shooting? You can't shoot. You should never shoot again. Okay, so it makes them think about talking to themselves with the same sort of respect and understanding that they would their teammates. Counting positive statements out loud, instead of having athletes just yell, good job or nice try, sometimes with the older athletes especially, I'll challenge what they're saying. So how many positive and constructive statements can you say that aren't the generic, way to go, good job, nice try? So it might be, that's a great shot for you. If someone made a mistake, instead of nice try, maybe they're offering a different finish or a different suggestion. So we're kind of tracking the more positive comments that might contribute to our connection later on. And the last one, hopefully we don't have any huge volleyball fans here, but I tell our players we're not volleyball players. They tend to laugh a lot, but often, if a point's scored in volleyball, they huddle and you always have the one person tapping their chest like, my bad, sorry. And I get a kick out of it because, we all saw the ball hit the floor, like whatever happened, it was a turnover. You passed the ball out of bounds. We saw it happen. So instead of taking that my bad hitting your chest approach, I'm looking for something to improve that option next time. So maybe I come in and I say, okay, I'll wait for your feet to be set next time before I pass you the ball. Or I'll come in and I say, do you want the ball earlier or later next time, right? And trying to solve the problem and fix that connection between teammates. Next is guiding feedback. So I had trouble, I didn't know what to call this, but feedback is a huge part of a coach's role. So really trying to engage the athlete with questions in terms of their environment, their task or behavior, and the people involved. Okay, so I do this with open-ended questions that allow me to understand how the athlete is processing or perceiving information. Okay, so I'm not trying to fix what happened. I'm trying to understand from their perspective. So some things I might ask them is something like, what did you see? What were you looking at? What other options were there? When giving feedback about cues, you could say, can you put whatever the feedback was into your own words? So if I said, when the defense is denying, you should cut back door, asking them to rephrase that and kind of make sense of it within their own understanding. Okay, and a lot of the times, like, communication takes two people, and a lot of the times athletes are kind of the scapegoat for coaches' communication failure. So if I give an athlete feedback and they don't execute or they make a mistake, they really might not have understood, or I might have stated it in a way that they can apply. So really trying to build on the sense of understanding from them to you and from you to them. Here's the build your own. So I don't know if anyone else gets really excited about build your own menus, but it's the same price. You can have whatever you want. You're kind of thinking about trying different options, getting creative. That's why I like to have practices sometimes. So I let the athletes build what they're doing. So they start thinking like a coach. They start understanding the purpose behind decisions. A few ways we've done this is choosing your team's action that is worth double points. So if I'm playing a small-sided game and I have 3 teammates and I have our tallest and strongest post who likes to play on the block, maybe I'll say, okay, our action is a cross screen. When we score out of a cross screen, we get double points. Okay, so I have to think about who am I and who's my teammates. And instead of being told that a cross screen is the best action for me, I make that decision myself or with my teammates. And then to flip that, you choose the action the other team must use. So if I have our best post player who likes to score on the block, and this team has 2 small point guards and another shooting guard, maybe I say they have to score out of a cross screen. So now it's something that might be more limiting to them, which helps my defensive scout. Who am I guarding? What does this team like to do? And where can we kind of emphasize our own advantage? And the last one, which is one of my favorites and still a work in progress, I call build your own shooting. So if I have a group of 4, I'll tell 3 players to grab a ball and go stand somewhere on the court. Okay, so they might stand out of bounds, they might stand on the sideline, they could stand on the elbow. And that 4th player has to create 3 different shots based on where the ball is standing. Okay, so if we think about the ball being on the elbow, the shooter has to think, what actions would they get a pass from the ball being in that spot? So if it's on the elbow and I'm on the wing, I probably can't just stand there and ask for a pass. It's really crowded. But maybe I'm coming off for a get or a dribble handoff, and now I'm scoring that way. So we can see how both the passer and the shooter have to think through a scenario where that would actually occur on the floor. With older players or teams that have already done a few of these build your own shooting, I allowed the ball to move. So they could pass the ball to somebody else or they could start dribbling. And now we're into that dynamic situation of gameplay. Okay, so still playing around with that idea, but again, starting to make them think about what's happening and why. Last one, which Robin sort of touched on, is writing it down. So provide time and resources to journal and debrief, ask probing questions about their emotions, their interactions, what they remember, what they're struggling with remembering, and get to a point where they can have journals all the time. So they're writing down how much they're scoring, they're writing down offenses. With our U16 provincial team, technically last year, because nobody played in the real last year, I had a confidence resume. So every team was given, or every player was given a blank piece of paper. They wrote their name on it And athletes and coaches have the ability to write an anchor or strength for that athlete on their paper. So if I think Sarah is a great passer, I might go to her paper and I write excellent passer. If I think Robin's an excellent three-point shooter, I might write three-point shooter onto her resume. So now I'm thinking, you know, if Robin's on the court with me, why would I take a three if I have an excellent three-point shooter in her? So again, building that sense of who am I and who's my teammate. Still working on the name of the confidence resume, but it's all a work in progress anyways. And then, yeah, these are other three questions that you can ask to kind of start your journaling or your debriefing, or start discussions on your resumes. This one here I really like. This is also from Mike. He's getting a lot of shout outs, but how could I have coached you better? So taking feedback from your athletes as well as so they can accept it from you as well. So some take-home messages are sports psychology is everywhere, so we might as well use it to our advantage. It's already at play within the drills and the practices that you're doing. So here's just some ways to be mindful. We're coaching people, so as much as we'd like to forget about some of the struggles maybe that we have off the court, it does impact what we're going to feel and see and perceive that day. And then same thing for the athletes as to you coaches, commit to your decision. So if this is something that you want to work on and improve on for athletes, it'll take time, it'll be chaotic, but commit to what you're doing and really give it a chance for you and your athletes. And then last comment I'll make here is that Michael Jordan in The Last Dance said he never asked someone to do something he didn't do. So a lot of these strategies can be used by coaches as well. And they're not just tips for their athletes to use, but you can definitely start thinking about some of the self-compassion, some of the journaling, and moving forward with your own learning as well. So with that, we'll lead to questions. Instead of do you have questions, I always ask, what are your questions, or give you a random number. So hopefully, Reagan, we have some questions for the three of us to wrap up the evening. Thanks.